The Blue Book for the 2016 Colorado ballot created some controversy this week. Proponents of the two measures regarding a presidential primary and opening up primaries to unaffiliated voters claim that wording added by a bipartisan group of legislators added considerable bias. Eric, from what we've seen of this issue, and this came out on Friday, so it's new to a lot of folks, do you think the proponents have a point?
I do think the proponents have a point. I think they have a right to be outraged by this, but more importantly than what the proponents think, it's what the voters of Colorado think. There are two issues here, and I think I'm only going to address one. The first issue is the merits of the two ballot measures. I think Penn and I probably disagree, but maybe there'll be some other time to air that disagreement. For me, this right now, today, is a process question. You have something amidst all the propaganda, all the hype that is out there in a political campaign, you have something that voters have come to really rely on for straightforward information, and that is the Blue Book. And efforts to politicize the Blue Book ought to be shunned and ought to be condemned. And this was such an effort to politicize it. You had a nonpartisan staff that ultimately wrote and vetted the pro and con arguments. And then you have legislators who have a vested interest in the current system, a vested interest in not opening up primaries any more than they are to independents, who took that language and decided to bastardize it a little bit to load the decks against these initiatives. I think it's shameful.
Penn, you're a former state lawmaker. You've seen this process. Do you smell shenanigans?
Not necessarily shenanigans, but the optics aren't good, and this was not a good move by legislators. The nonpartisan staff does a great job of writing the Blue Book. And if you've never seen the process, what they do is they get the proponents and opponents of the different ballot measures together, and they craft wording sort of that everybody can live with and that everybody think fairly represents the pro side and the con side. And then a legislative committee sort of has to bless it all. You really need to find some egregious wording as a legislator before you go in and tinker and start changing the wording, because that's why you've got the nonpartisan staff working directly with the affected constituencies. I don't know if anybody's trying to be crooked. I think Eric's right. You know, as a legislator, you do have a vested interest in the existing nominating process, so you may not want to change that. So it doesn't look good. I don't support the idea in the first place, but I will concede the process, and this process was not good, and it shouldn't have been done.
Patty, since this was a bipartisan group that voted with this new wording, did we finally find something for lawmakers to agree upon in Colorado?
Well, we found something for us to agree upon, which is the Blue Book is really an incredible, useful tool for Coloradans. In general, you haven't had huge fights over it. These were shenanigans the group didn't need. You know, as an editor, I can say, not as a lawyer, but you look at a sentence and everyone's going to read it differently. So of course people are going to disagree with how the Blue Book is phrased. But over the years, they have shown themselves to be very, very fair in their assessments.
David, wrap it up for us.
One thing that I think the legislators said, which is actually true, you could argue about how that should go in the Blue Book, is if you hand everybody a ballot which has both primaries on it, Republican and Democrat, and so we don't care whether, you can be a registered Democrat, but if you want to vote in the Republican primary, go ahead. Or if you're an independent, you don't have to affiliate with, you can walk in on the day of the election right now and affiliate with one party or the other and vote in their primary, but this would say everything's open for everything. You're going to have people who say, oh, I'm going to vote, say, in the Republican Senate primary because that's contested, and then in my state representative race, I'm going to vote in the Democratic primary because that's where the contest is, and people are going to do that, and that is going to lead to probably about 9% spoiled ballots, which is going to get into a complete fiasco on election counting because we're going to have so many spoiled ballots because people, in fact, will not understand that once you cast that first vote on one side or the other, you got to stay on that side for every other race down the ballot.